I think it's going to be a very interesting weekend for Red Bull. I think, they came out and said after Singapore that, the technical directive isn't, to do with anything with our performances. It's just basically track specific. But
do I dare to dream that today could be a day where Mercedes might actually win a race? But
he tried to overtake Max for the podium so he could keep second place in the championship, and Max won't let him by.
Yo people, welcome back to On Track GP. We're here for your Japan Grand Prix preview. Listen, my brother, behind production now, in front of the camera. Coylin, in the building. How are you doing, bro?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm getting back into the thick of things with these constant races. Obviously, probably the race of the season last weekend. Just before we get into the preview for Japan, how are your emotions during that? Because we did not have anything like what we've seen all season, just complete anarchy.
Yeah, it was a great weekend from the very start. Obviously, Red Bull was struggling straight away, which is a massive surprise, and to see them not even get into Q3, like it's been 5 years ago, Russia 2018, since that last happened, where neither Red Bull got into Q3. So from the get-go, it was pretty exciting, and then obviously you had Carlos trying to grab the win off Russell in those final few laps where it all went wrong for George.
Insane levels of defending from Carlos to help out his friend. So, Suzuka International Racing Course, 3,608 miles long, 18 turns, 2 of those turns which Vettel has got some beehives planned for us, but we'll get to that in just a second. Opened in 1962, has been hosting F1 since 1987, and has done every single year apart from 2008 and 2007. Where the Fuji Speedway was in its place. The lap record, of course, 1 minute 30 from my guy Lewis Hamilton in 2019, that Mercedes W10. Hopefully the W14 could go in that fast. We'd be happy people. And then, of course, now Vettel is now having those beehives at a couple of corners. You said actually that he was doing this in Austria as well. But my question is, obviously, we got those curbs painted in black and yellow, but there was some talk about him potentially coming back into F1. Isn't that hypocritical of what it's contradicting what he's doing, if anything, trying to make the planet a better place, and he's going to go back into the Formula 1 car and put those emissions back into the atmosphere?
Yeah, it is. It kind of is, and it isn't, because you have to remember coming into 2026 now, they're going to be trying to use, I don't know what way it is, it's like biosustainable fuels and things like this. So, there's a big push with F1 within the whole organisation to be net zero by 2030. So I can see Vettel, he's just trying to do his bit and try to help along that. And, maybe if he does make a comeback in a way to have a driver that's really, pushing about sustainability and everything, to get him back in the car that's pushing towards this as well, or a sport, maybe it'll be a good move in a way.
Yeah, I just know those interviews that he does on the BBC at times will be a lot harsher if he's back in that Formula 1 seat trying to fight for the planet at the same time as driving that car. I know they're going to have some tough questioning for him. But going back, obviously, to what happened last week, it's provoked this response, I guess, from the paddock. Zach Brown saying that it's an anomaly, that Red Bull's performance last weekend. Is there anything to cling to that in this particular track that Red Bull may struggle again? People were talking about potentially the flexi wing maybe having an impact, but we don't really know. It wasn't confirmed by the team. They felt like they were going to respond. Max was very much urgent to respond on what happened last week. With a lot of frustration, worst performance of the season for sure. Do you feel like this can happen again? This is obviously a clear indicator as to whether there is an issue or if it's just a dip, this track.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a very interesting weekend for Red Bull. I think, they came out and said after Singapore that, the technical directive isn't, to do with anything with our performances. It's just basically track specific. But there's always going to be a couple of people within the team that will be kind of hoping that this weekend goes well. And I think, like I said, it'll be a very important weekend to see if they can get back to form, or is this a bigger problem within the team. But personally, I'm thinking, we're back to a permanent circuit now with Suzuka. They always run well at Suzuka Red Bull. I don't think there'll be a problem. I think they'll be back at the front.
And of course, this is where Max Verstappen secured his second title. They were almost on the cusp of making their own record there in straight wins, but it's not so easily done. What they were doing was phenomenal. Max Verstappen as eager as ever to get himself back to the front of the grid. But Perez has been questioned as well by Steve Jones of Channel 4 to say, is he getting the rub of the green with the teammates sometimes, in terms of he's taken such good care of Max in obviously Abu Dhabi. Remember the job that he did there. Sometimes he doesn't get that love back. I personally feel like it's a bit of a cop-out. I feel like, you're kind of tasked as second driver to be right behind Max, pushing, competing if you can, but he has never really shown that he can do that this season. I don't really feel like there's there's anything Max can really do there. I don't know what he was hitting at. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, well, there was always the kind of, the story we know last year from Brazil where he tried to overtake Max for the podium so he could keep second place in the championship, and Max wouldn't let him by. There's little things like that, like especially when Max has won a championship, or you could say he's won a championship now this year already. Nobody's going to catch him now, but just little things like that. And Perez always he always starts the season well, but he's talked about before where when the upgrades come in, that's the problem, because the car is so centred towards Max. Let's say when the upgrades come in, it takes him longer to get adjusted to them, and then the performance starts dropping and everything, as we've seen. So. Yeah, it's tricky for Perez. I agree with you. There's no denying that he's a second driver there. But he said there that he can't. It's not a fact that he feels like the team doesn't help him, but you can see sometimes it does. It can feel that way from the outside.
Yeah, I do want to throw in Liam Lawson into this segment just purely because his performance last week was very impressive. Obviously, a rookie, first time on that track, and absolutely blitzed it in Singapore. Got his team points, but he is part of the Red Bull kind of group at AlphaTauri. And from what I heard, it sounded like as if they didn't really have a seat for him next year. They were going to keep him kind of in the pipeline, and that would assumingly mean that everything's going to stay the same in these two teams, with Perez obviously staying at Red Bull next season, but also maybe Danny Ricciardo will get his opportunity to do a full season without injury. What did you make of that? Do you think Christian Horner and Red Bull might be making a mistake by not pushing him into a seat next year a lot earlier, because he looks incredibly talented from what I saw?
Yeah, no, I do think so. I mean, the latest rumours going around that next year it'll be Tsunoda and Ricciardo with AlphaTauri, but you have to look at what Lawson has achieved in his 2 or 3 races now.
Yeah.
I mean, to go and score points in Singapore in your third race or whatever it has been for Lawson on that circuit in that car was a phenomenal job. Like, I was convinced after the race that that's it. He's going to be in for 2024. So. Yeah. To hear these rumours, like, I know the commercial viability of Ricciardo is a lot stronger. Yeah. Tsunoda obviously as well, he's doing really well, having his best year in Formula 1. But, I mean, to leave Lawson out after what he's been doing, and of course, like Richard's been telling us, dominating Super Formula as well in Japan. Yeah. That's not an easy championship by any means. So, yeah, as much as I'd like to see Ricciardo back to a full-time seat, I think they're making a mistake by kind of pushing Lawson back a little bit.
Do you think that Liam Lawson has the opportunity potentially to go to another team in Formula 1 and get himself on this grid, or do you think he'd be more sensible to be patient and wait for Red Bull to kind of give him that promotion? Because we've seen Oscar Piastri literally go straight out of Alpine and go straight into that McLaren.
I'd like to think that Red Bull would want to hold on to him, because obviously he's going to be a future star if he gets into Formula 1. Yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did end up at like a Williams or somewhere like this, because you have to remember it was Red Bull and Mercedes that organised Alex Albon to go to Williams. Yeah. I don't know if it's the case now, but Albon, when he joined Williams, he was still technically contracted as a Red Bull driver. There's that agreement there, so it can happen. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see if it did happen, maybe next year, Williams or whatever. Could Lawson still get on the grid? Yeah,
you could definitely argue there's a seat there at Williams as well, maybe to be taken. Mercedes, we'll move on to them as well. Their technical director, James Allison, has said that George Russell was inconsolable after his race-ending collision on the final lap in Singapore. To be expected, to be fair. You're literally on the cusp of getting a podium. You've had a really long race. That Singapore race is draining as it possibly can be. And then for the last moment for him to just go off into the sidings and Hamilton goes past, it was a lot. He's been backed by the team to bounce back strongly this weekend at Suzuka. What did you make of Mercedes' performance? Because obviously they got up until that DNF for Russell, they were in positions 3 and 4. It's pretty good as it gets really for Mercedes, but it is a very up and down time, it seems, with that W14, and they keep lumping on these upgrades, and it does seem to be not really a clear progression. It seems to be like, one step back, one step forward, one step back. They're a very difficult team to read. Maybe they should just commit to next season. But what do you feel is going on at Mercedes? Do you have any confidence they'll be back next season in what you're seeing?
Well, from hearing from the team what they're saying about next year, it sounds confident. But then again, it sounded confident this time last year when they were on about this car. So it's very tricky to know with Mercedes. Like you said, every race they've been up and down. They've been introducing upgrades, and it just hasn't worked for them for whatever reason. It's really strange. But yeah, they did incredibly well at Singapore. They took the bit the bullet and did the alternate strategy under the virtual safety car, and it worked out really well for them. It was just a shame that Russell ended his race the way he did. Yeah,
they were so aggressive. Yeah, they were so aggressive on strategy. It was so nice to see, and I was watching that race and I was thinking to myself, they got fresh tyres on now. They've got, yes, a bit of a gap to close, but they were catching them so quickly, and I thought, do I dare to dream that today could be a day where Mercedes might actually win a race? But unfortunately not to be. In the end, incredible defending from Sainz and protecting his friend Lando Norris. And I think there was a team radio that said, listen, this is on purpose. Yeah. And I said, wow, this is some next level confidence right now. So yeah, it was very impressive in the final stages. But listen, at least we got a podium. So moving on to Ferrari as well, and of course, the race winner. Sainz has been highly praised for his driving in Singapore, and rightly so. With former driver Anthony Davidson recently noting how good he was defensively in the previous 2 races, and it shows he's been one of the best drivers in F1 at defending his positions. Also, his one lap speed was pretty good as well in qualifying. Is there a shift in the balance between Sainz and Leclerc, do you feel, maybe happening at Ferrari? Because I feel like, yes, there is no maybe number 1 driver, but I always felt like Leclerc maybe just had a little edge on him, maybe in that paddock, but maybe not now. Do you feel like the tides could be turning? Because obviously this season Leclerc it's been difficult for him as well. Yeah,
well, whatever Carlos Sainz got up to in the summer break, it definitely worked for him, because since he's come back, he's a different driver altogether. You know, we had team principal Frederick Vasseur saying over the week, you know, there's no real kind of one driver and second driver at Ferrari at the minute, because they're both very good drivers. So to see Sainz step up like this, like we seen him in Monza, his defending was on the limit. Even Perez said to him after, you know, what were you doing? You can't do that. He says, no, everything I did was perfect. And then again in Singapore, we seen him, you know, keeping Lando in the DRS, because he knew that if he broke off away from Lando, then Russell would get him and that'd be game over for him. Yeah. So, you know, to think about that at a race and to know if I can hold Lando,
not just drive as fast as you can.
Yeah, if I can hold Lando on the DRS, that'll benefit me. You know, there's these little things he's doing lately that I think is really going in his favour, you know, and I think he could step up to be a good driver there.
I wonder how difficult it is to judge as well, because as a driver, you're always trained and you're always kind of thinking along the lines of, I need to drive as fast as I can at all times. Yes, there are times you need to manage the tyres, certain corners you need to take them slightly easier. You get used to that. But how difficult must it be to manage that gap and say, I'm going to be 0.8 of a second gap to the car behind consistently from lap to lap? How do you even do that? How do you judge that? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you know how fast you should be going to know that Lando won't overtake you and you're not overdoing it? And you know, it's just incredible. I thought the management there from him. So yeah, I think he deserves all the credit in the world for that. That was a serious performance. And obviously, let's see if they can continue that this weekend, because now there's some serious confidence. And that fight for second between Mercedes and obviously Ferrari and McLaren have been a bit late to the party, but they've got themselves in there. Aston Martin have started to drop off. Who do you think will get that second place between those teams?
To be honest, with the way it's going, I think it'll be Ferrari at the minute, because again, like Sainz from the summer break, they just kind of stepped up. I don't know, have they introduced upgrades or what is it? But they've really done another step with that car. So yeah, I think they'll be a shoe-in for second place now.
Speaking of Aston Martin, very tricky weekend in Singapore for that team, despite introducing upgrades to the car as well. Lance Stroll, obviously massive crash in the qualifying, and that was tough to watch, because that was at some speed. Do you know how fast he was going when he went into that side?
I'm not entirely sure. I seen rumours of about 150 mile an hour when he spun off. Yeah, which would be the going rate for that corner, you know. Yeah, it was a serious impact.
And yeah, thankfully he's okay. And then obviously Fernando Alonso is quite annoyed with the team's performance in Singapore as well. He's saying the car was undrivable. What happened with Aston Martin? Because they started so strong. They were getting consistent podiums with Alonso, third, second sometimes, earlier on the season. Lance Stroll, even with the wrist injury, had a couple of decent performances, got himself in some good positions, 7th, etc. And they've just kind of fallen off and gone to the wayside. Is that a consequence of first time being in this position as a team and kind of the unknown and investing so heavily at the start, and then obviously maybe not being able to keep up? They keep having upgrades, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I think a bit like Red Bull taking everybody else by surprise, Aston Martin took a lot of the grid by surprise, considering how good of a car they had at the start. And then, yeah, like you said, the first half of the season was a dream for them. Alonso constantly on the podium. But then we got the Silverstone, and Pirelli introduced the new tyre structures, harder structures or whatever it was. And since then, even Aston Martin have come out and said, these tyres no longer suit our car. Yeah. And for whatever reason, then whatever upgrades they've introduced or whatever, it just hasn't worked out. I think it's a case of, you see Ferrari coming up now, you see McLaren coming up now. Teams are kind of getting comfortable with their packages and what to do with them. Yeah. That Aston Martin are getting a little bit outdeveloped at the minute.
Yeah, no, that's fair to say. And I am looking forward to seeing what they do at the start of next season, because they have a lot of resources. Yeah. They are incredibly well backed, and they were seriously ambitious at the start of the season with what they were doing. So I'm not going to rule them out for once again making maybe a massive jump again and surprising the grid. But yeah, it's been a bit of a, I think the rest of the season feels like it's going to kind of peter out for them and just be a bit flat. But still, very big upgrades and jumps from them. McLaren as well, new contract for Oscar Piastri as well, extended to 2026, which is great to see. And maybe as a consequence of his good work this season, now both cars are being given all the upgrades, not just Lando. That is going to be interesting because at this point it's been, I guess, unfair. You've got a first driver, you've got a second driver, one guy's getting the upgrades. Obviously they're investing into him to get more points, which is fair enough. He's more experienced. The rookie's never going to get that leeway on the first season. But now he's shown that he's got so much quality. They're like, do you know what? Here are your upgrades. How do you think this kind of battle is there a big gap between these two, do you feel? Because obviously we know one's got much more experience in Lando, but Oscar's been unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying there about, Lando always getting the upgrades first. I think this was a similar case in Austria where Lando got the upgrades and Piastri only got some, or he was running the old car, and he was still up there with him. Yeah. We seen the Silverstone when they both had the upgrades, then both cars second and third or whatever it was in qualifying and up there, and then Piastri and Spa doing really well. Yeah. And Singapore as well, Piastri had half the upgrades Norris had, and he started from the back, got caught out by Stroll's accident, and finished 7th. Yeah. So it just goes to show,
Now I want to see what he's like when he's got everything that Lando's got. Maybe potentially these two could be battling, but that's a fantastic driver lineup that they've got. I don't think they'll be going anywhere near that for a while and making any changes. If they keep progressing as a team, and I felt like in the last video I felt like they were maybe potentially the closest to challenging Red Bull next season, just based on the improvements that they've made in the back end. I think if they can continue that, I think they might, especially with their driver lineup, I really like it. I think they could be up there, contending for those podiums consistently, and maybe even trying to push Max. Because as a duo, I think that's the duo I might have the most faith in to just keep up consistent performance. Obviously, we know Leclerc and Sainz are talented. We know, even at Mercedes, of course, as well. But I don't know, it's something with Lando and Oscar. I just feel like those two can put together a serious challenge and fight. As long as their relationship, doesn't become heated, and you never know in Formula One once the wins actually start coming.
Throw a potential world championship in or something.
Yeah, now we'll see who's really friends. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know. I think that pairing has a lot of potential. So I'm very interested to see how that goes. Very happy to see McLaren back up there. Alpine as well. Gasly had a strong showing in Singapore, finishing in 7th. Ocon. We'll be looking to recover as well after a failure put him out of the race. It was a shame. It's a shame. There's some great wall-to-wall racing actually between the Alpines and Alonso at one point in that race. But Alpine as well. What are your hopes for them in Suzuka? Because again, just sometimes they show the potential with that 7th place that they can actually be in there, but obviously there was a lot of context to that. But again, this season hasn't really kicked on for them.
Yeah, Alpine are a funny team. We started this season with they were coming out and saying, "Oh, this car is this car is that," and there's rumours that they were going to start making their way up the grid. But it felt like, and I think one of us commented on it in one of the previews a couple of months ago. It's like every weekend we talk about Alpine as if they're going to do something, and they never do. And then you see in Monza how they struggled on a high or on a low downforce circuit, no power. It's tricky to read them. I think, Japan probably the aim would be points for both cars again. Yeah. But considering all the talk that was around them at the start of the year, it's really strange to see that, especially when McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari, teams around them have made progress, that they just kind of stayed in the same position.
Yeah, it's a strange one, especially because, again, I think they've got a talented duo there. AlphaTauri as well, we were talking about Liam Lawson and the potential of what he could be doing next season, but it seems like they're going to be announcing very soon their driver lineup. It's expected to be Ricciardo and Tsunoda, as you were saying earlier. Is Ricciardo on his way back to potentially being in this race involved, or too soon?
Too soon. The latest rumours it was actually Christian Horner that said it, that he's aiming for Qatar, which is 2 weeks' time. Okay. But it all depends on how the injury progresses, I suppose. Yeah.
Do you think there's anything Liam Lawson can... Because obviously, listen, if he was to get into the top 10 again, have another incredible performance, if he is in this Japan Grand Prix, which it looks like he could be, is there anything that he can do to sway this decision? Or do you think it's... I mean, if they're going to announce it, is that set in stone? Once it's announced, have you ever seen a team go back on that?
No, not really, apart from the whole stuff that we've seen with Piastri last year in Alpine. But, I think what AlphaTauri maybe are trying to do is announcing Ricciardo, because obviously he is kind of the safer option. He's, like I said, driver viability and commerciability is good there.
Yeah.
But I think going into 2024, it'll be a case of, because Lawson has done this already, he's jumped in and performed, that if there's the slightest inkling that either Ricciardo or Tsunoda aren't performing to the potential that they should be, I think you could see a switch within maybe the first couple of races even.
As quick as they were with De Vries at Williams, I think they could be. Would he even be down as a reserve driver, or do you think not really possible for him to be in that position?
Yeah, I'd say if things were confirmed, he'd be a reserve driver anyway, like he is now. But
by default.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that develops, because I think those two are under a lot of pressure with someone like Liam Lawson coming through. Alfa Romeo as well, a team that just seemed to just be chilling. I don't know what it is about this team. Maybe I've got an agenda. Someone tell me in the comments if I've got an agenda against Alfa Romeo, but they just, I don't know what it is about this team. They're just so bland. There's just nothing going on. Bottas, he's kind of one of these drivers that I've said before feels like a Kimi to me. Is there any change, do you think, in this potential driver lineup going into next year? Or are they just going to really just leave it up until the change to Sauber and whatnot?
Well, the driver lineup was actually confirmed a couple of weeks ago of Bottas and Joe. But you know, I can understand keeping Joe. I didn't think he'd stay. I think Bottas could be on a multi-year contract. Or could be nearly up, I'm not so sure. But, you know, you have to remember next year we see the return of the Chinese Grand Prix in Shanghai.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a massive thing, because there's never been a Chinese driver on the grid at Shanghai. And, you know, you have to think about what that's going to do for the team next year. And, you know, the big push from China and everything. So I'm not surprised Joe was kept on the grid for that. But I am generally surprised that he stayed within the team, especially when you could argue, again, the Lawsons, Theo Porchera from F2.
Yeah.
Then, you know, that's a Sauber Junior driver. There's these kind of options that you'd have to argue, could they do better if they're put in the car? Yeah,
Mick Schumacher, Nico Hülkenberg also mentioned apparently heated discussions and arguments behind the scenes about keeping them, not keeping them, things like that. I'm looking forward to seeing on Drive to Survive. I think Alfa Romeo are one of these teams where it seems calm on the surface and it seems kind of bland, which I feel like it is. But behind the scenes, when it is kind of the cameras are put on and the lights are put on that team, I feel like there will be some words said, and there will be a lot going on that we don't know about. Haas look to be performing slightly better in Singapore as well, both cars getting into the top 10. Magnussen finishing the race with a point in 10th as well. The team confirmed that there's big upgrades coming for the US Grand Prix in Texas. With Haas, we've seen some great qualifyings this season from Hülkenberg. How far can Haas really go though? Because we've spoken about that midfield battle upwards from Alpine, you know, to the Aston Martins and the Ferraris. It feels like that kind of upper midfield is as far as it goes really for a team like Haas. Is that harsh to say?
No, you see, the problem with Haas is the fact that they've such a partnership with Ferrari. Yeah. So essentially all their parts are, you know, ex-Ferrari parts or parts that Ferrari are already using. So they don't really have much of a say in the direction of the development of their car. You know, obviously they're introducing those upgrades in Texas, which I've heard is like more Red Bull style upgrades. Okay. It's very late to bring upgrades to a car. You know, I don't understand it unless they're trying something for next year. But
yeah, it has to have something surely to do with next year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd imagine. So, you know, Haas are tricky, and we've seen this problem with them this year where they qualify really well and then they run through their tyres in the middle of the race and they just fall off. It's been a constant problem. It's hit them every season with every car they've had for whatever reason. Yeah. So if they could find a way to figure that out even for next year and to be able to maintain the positions when they qualify, well, you know, they could be up there.
You're right. If they maintain the positions from qualifying, they'd be actually a serious team in terms of, like, we'd be talking about a serious threat to Alpine consistently as well. But for some reason, like you said, that just isn't materialising. Finally, at Williams as well, Sargent's admitted that he needs to stop the mistakes, such as the one in Singapore, if he wants to secure a driver of the team for 2024. This is the position. I'm glad I'm seeing this name Liam Lawson here, because I feel like this is the position on the grid that is so Liam Lawson. It's got his name written all over it. Now, like you said, and I'm glad you almost kind of calmed me in saying that, yeah, Red Bull and Mercedes can do business. You know, it isn't off limits. It isn't something that's unheard of, with Albon, because I would love to see it. I know that Williams is not, you know, the strongest car on the grid, but Albon's shown at times this season that if you are talented and you can extract some sort of pace out of that car. So, and Williams, obviously, I've said it so many times, very historic team. I'd love to see them up the grid anyway. So I want to see that happen. What's your prediction for that, though? Will it happen?
I think it will happen, you know. I think obviously James Vowles came in at the start of the year and took over the team principal role, and he's been saying a lot of the changes he's been making isn't for this year, isn't for next year, it's for 5 years' time. And a lot of the things that have been coming out of the Williams team have been very positive. Like, we've even seen them this year, the step they've made. Yeah, it's up to 7th in the constructors, but that's you know, a massive change from last year, the year before, you know,
grid, really,
constant back of the grid. You know, you could safely say, or you could safely bet that Albon's going to be up in the points this weekend, given the nature of the circuit and things like this. So yeah, I think they're on their way up. And it like you said, such a historic team, so many, you know, memories and histories, championships, wins. Yeah. It's great to see them kind of coming back up again.
Yeah, I think it's a team that could inspire like a Liam Lawson to come in there and try and revive it. And I think if you can put in proper performances there, that's going to almost raise the eyebrows of top teams like Red Bull more so than just taking a back seat for a year and playing nice almost. So I don't know, I'd like to see him in that seat, and I feel like Sargent, I'd be shocked if he was in that seat next year. I just don't think, obviously he's a rookie and, you know, we have to maybe give it more time, but I just feel like the sport is so ruthless and there's only so many spaces on that grid, and when you've got talent coming through, you've got to take a chance and look to it, because otherwise, you're going to stagnate. Other teams are going to take those talents, and next thing you know, you're going to be back in the same position you've been, which is towards the back of the grid. So I think if they can get those two, Albon and Liam Lawson, that's a very, very interesting partnership right there for next season. That would be very exciting. So I'd love to see it. I want to get your predictions for the Grand Prix this weekend. First, second, and third, of course, for those podium positions. What do you think is going to happen? What do you see?
Well, I see Red Bull back to form, first of all. I think they'll be back at the top of the grid. Can McLaren challenge them with the new upgrades? I think so. I think it could be very tight up there, but I think Red Bull might just have a little bit. So I'd probably say for the win, I'd go Verstappen, I'd go Lando second, and I'll throw in a wild one, I'll say Sainz third. Okay,
Sainz getting that cred. And who do you think will be the biggest disappointment from that race?
Biggest disappointment?
Can be a team, if you think the circuit maybe doesn't suit that team's setup.
You've caught me now. I'm not so sure. I'd probably say Aston Martin. I mean, they seem to be struggling a little bit. We've seen Alonso getting a little hot under the collar last weekend in Singapore when things weren't going right, and you know, we all know what it's like when Alonso starts to get angry with his team. Yeah, exactly. So
maybe he'll be on the move next season.
But yeah, I just think with the way they're going at the minute, I think they might even be, well, Stroll will be struggling to get in the points. I think Alonso will be in the second half of the points maybe. Yeah. He'll be trying his best, but I can't see anything from Aston Martin anymore this season.
Yeah, I feel so as well. But I'm looking forward to the back end of this season to see who's going to deliver with these upgrades, because they keep lumping them on. They keep throwing these upgrades out, even though I feel like the season's coming to the point where maybe it is time to think about next year. Maybe it is part of the plan next year, but we'll see with all these teams. So, guys, that has been your Japanese Grand Prix preview. Very much looking forward to the race. Of course, we'll be covering the qualifying and, of course, the race itself. Very early start, the earliest of starts, and I hope that race starts on time and there are no delays, because we will not be very impressed if they come with some foolishness and rain. So we will be there, guys. Make sure you smash up the likes and subscribe, and we'll see you there for the qualifying and race.